welcome back everyone. So in our last video, we were taking pieces off of the sprue or runner. Now we get to put all those pieces together. So I'm going to show you a couple of different types of cements and adhesives that we can use for this in joining the two fuselage halves together. So first up, we'll show you the Tamiya extra thin quick setting variety, how it works for this. Then I'm going to show you the Flexi file, stuff that I just got for really cheap, and I just put it into a Tamiya bottle, so I've got that X to remind me. And we're going to try something a little bit different that I've got. I haven't used it for this particular purpose too much. Mr. Cement Deluxe, it's a little thicker. And then a little bit of a wild card. We're going to go with some really thin CA. See how that works and see if it does some really good things for the ghost seams and removing those. As we're attaching anything, want to make sure that the joins are nice and smooth and I can see that it's nice and it's fitting together well on this modern-ish kit. And so I'm going to just put in there some of this Tamiya extra thin. This stuff is extremely thin, so sometimes you gotta give it a couple goes. And I'm just globbing it on. Probably want to be a little more precise with that, but as you can see, it gets to a pretty good result and it will evaporate pretty quick. So I'm going to hold this, let it sit, and then we're going to go on to the next section. All right, on the next section, I'm going to use the Flexi file. I'm just going to make sure they're nice and mated together, nice and smooth. Being a little bit more careful. Okay. I'm going to hold that together, let it do its thing, and then go on to the next section. Alright, so now let's try Mr. Cement. Well, that's on there pretty good. So this stuff is quite a bit more thick. I haven't used it as much. Let's see how it joins. And it'll help me with this gap a little bit because it gives you a little bit more working time. A little more gloppy. Kind of clamp that together a little better. Okay, let's see how that does. Alright, so as you can see, I've got kind of a gap there. I think that's just my goof sanding. So we're going to come back to that a little bit later. Maybe use something a little bit different. Alright, so let's try this stuff aft. So we'll let that sit and come back to it and see. Alright, so for the forward section, I'm going to do something a little bit different. We're going to try super glue. Make sure it's all nice and lined up. And this is really extra thin super glue. So kind of need to take care with it. This application. I can just put a bead. Sure it's nice and tight together. let that cure. The extra thin stuff does take a little bit of time for it to do its thing. But wow, man, this is super thin. It even ran through that panel line. Now I've got a fingerprint to clean up with. So that's one drawback you could say of this. But once it cures, it's there. So we've come back, and what I did is I just put blue Sharpie, and you can kind of see, just to check my work a little bit, see where there's some cracks, see where there's some different things. There's some points where I don't know what I did. Must have sanded it way too much, and we get into a gap. So fill that in a little bit, and once we think we're good with just a spot test with the blue marker, then I'm going to put some primer on it, and we're going to see how each of these accomplish the job. Okay, so we got our fuselage halves together, and you can see we got some work to do. We got some gaps that will need to be filled up. We'll be getting to that on the next video. But I was pleasantly surprised with this thin CA. So in some areas, it worked out really well. I'm going to have to give it a couple of days and see if there's any ghost seams that pop up. But what do we need to accomplish in this phase? Number one, got to make sure we got a good bond. And in all these sections, I was playing around with it, you could see some of my fingerprint marks because it hasn't fully dried that I'm going to have to sand out. It's all fused, so check that box. What next do we need to look at? We need to make sure that we're minimizing additional work later on. And super glue has its merits there. But what we're going to do in the next video is I'm going to show you how to clean up some of these gaps with a couple of different methods, and while doing that. But just to overview the different cements, so quick setting I would use for smaller parts, and since it evaporates real quick, it works really well for that. When we get into Mr. Cement Deluxe, some of the thicker stuff, this is great for when you want to apply the glue and then put the part on. So that works real well for those. Other stuff, especially this quick setting, it's going to dry up too fast. Then going into Flexi file, plastic weld type stuff, pretty similar to just standard Tamiya extra thin. Since I found this pretty cheap, I've got a ton to go through with those. So I'll be using plenty of that. But the surprising result is getting into this really thin CA with a precision applicator. That worked out pretty dang well. I was pretty surprised. So from here, we'll be doing a next video, and I'm going to show you how to fill in these seams to make it so we don't have any ghost seams that pop back up. So until next time.